For our 150th anniversary, the sesquicentennial, you all are very lucky to get to hear from two historic figures, Gaylord Judd Clarke and his beautiful wife, Frances Helen Corey Clarke. If you please welcome them to speak.
Who answered the call by W. Mills for spiritual guidance in the midst of gunfights, gambling, violence, death, and corruption in El Paso, where lawlessness ruled? Judge Gaylord Judd Clarke answered. He is memorialized in the Good Shepherd window over the altar with the inscription, "To the glory of God and in memory of Gaylord Judd Clarke, founder of this church." Born February 25, 1836, died December 7, 1870. Gaylord Clarke was born in 1836 on a successful farm in Tioga County, New York. He preferred a preparatory seminary and Union College at Schenectady, New York, to farming with his family. Clarke attended Albany Law School, graduating in 1859, and later was admitted to the bar. During college, he supported himself with a job at the Schenectady Star as assistant editor and editorial writer with the Troy Daily Times. His future wife's father, the Honorable Alan Corey, was the owner of the newspaper. Clarke's father, Hiram J. Clarke, was of English and Dutch heritage. His ancestors fought in the Revolutionary War in the War of 1812. Gaylord's mother was Rhonda Osborne Reed. Why is Judge Clarke special to this church? An early newspaper describes him as a gentleman of spotless character and irreproachable private life, a well-read and thorough lawyer, an eloquent and electrical speaker, and a finished writer of both poetry and prose, and possessed the elements of popularity in a rare degree. In 1867, W. Mills, pioneer El Pasoan, financed Gaylord Clarke, his wife Frances Helen Corey Clarke, and Anna, their daughter, to join Mills in El Paso. This was a low point in the lives of the Clarkes when they were living in Nebraska. Gaylord had wanted to be a U.S. senator from that state, but had failed. He and Frances had married in 1859 and had produced 4 children, Anna, Rhonda Reed, Gaylord Jr., and Clement, for whom Ms. Clarke named the Little Mission in El Paso. Only Anna survived. W. Mills saw the need in El Paso for spiritual guidance, so he connected with his old friend, Gaylord, a New York man who had been Mills' college chum. Clarke first became collector of customs here, opened his law practice, and later, in 1870, was appointed judge of the district court in El Paso. He was committed to taming this area of the Wild West where most people carried 6-shooters. There were no Protestant churches between Brownsville, and Santa Fe at that time. So at his home, Clarke read the Anglican service on Sunday mornings and evenings to small groups, and he read homilies for the gatherings. He would give a talk, which developed into a sermon, since that was his desire to be a clergyman. Yet the little home gatherings didn't seem to be sufficient. He and his friend, Colonel Albert Fountain, asked themselves, where can we find a clergyman to travel to El Paso to help us? They rode together to Austin to ask Bishop Alexander Gregg for such a man of courage. If you've driven from El Paso to Austin, Houston, or Dallas, you know how long that drive can be and that distance is. The Reverend Joseph Wilcom Tays, chaplain of the Texas Senate, answered this call in 1870. Tays traveled the month-long journey from Austin to El Paso, accompanied by his 2 sons and a military escort because of the threat of Indian attack. Parson Hayes had recently lost his wife, Jeremiah, and their baby to yellow fever. Tays conducted the first Protestant church service in the vast West Texas area on October 9, 1870, Then tragedy struck. Only 2 months later, on December 7, 1870, Judge Clarke was murdered by B.F. Williams during a dramatic street gunfight, worthy of any Western movie you have ever seen. Clarke was just 34 years old when he died.
I'm delighted and honored to represent Mrs. Frances Helen Corey Clarke, and I'm Karen Hoover. Mrs. Frances Helen Corey Clarke, wife of Judge Gaylord Judd Clarke, is best known for naming the little mission that would become the Church of St. Clement, and for being a pioneer in education in El Paso, beginning in 1867. She was born in Whipple City, that's Greenwich, New York, on June the 14th, 1836, graduating from the Greenwich Academy and Young Ladies Seminary at Saratoga Springs. I'd like to know if any of you out there are fly fishers, because the Battenkill River near Whipple City is very, very good for trout fishing. Frances had a Scotch-Irish father, the Honorable Alan Corey, and a Quaker English mother, Anne Whipple, a descendant of William Whipple, who signed the Declaration of Independence. She married Gaylord Judd Clarke in 1859 when he graduated from Union College. She had 4 children: Anna, Rhonda Reed, Gaylord Jr., and Clement. Only Anna survived. And if you've lost children, you know the pain that she must have been feeling. They were married 11 years up to his death in 1870, and when she returned to her old home in New York, she married George H. Williamson 11 years later. As long as she lived, she sent St. Clement a Christmas offering in memory of little Clement and an Easter offering in honor of Gaylord Clarke. So El Paso Chronicles by Leon Metz records that in the spring of 1867, Mrs. Frances Corey Clarke assumed control of Arabella Reed School in order to teach her own daughter, Anna, as well as other children in the area. This is the largest school in El Paso at that time. She taught the children literature, history, and culture every day. Regarding the naming of St. Clement, the Clarke's 2 children, Rhonda Reed and Gaylord Jr., had passed away when little Clement, the bright spot in their lives, was 6 weeks old. Gaylord Clarke had contracted smallpox on a business trip, and while Mrs. Clarke nursed him to health, the baby little Clement died. She later said in naming the church, "I should like to have the name continued, which I have already given, of St. Clement. Then it will bear the name of one of God's great saints and one of his own little lambs." So who was William Whipple, an ancestor of Frances Helen Corey Clarke? He was born in Maine in 1731 and died in November 1785. He was a signatory of the United States Declaration of Independence as a representative of the state of New Hampshire. He was a member of the Continental Congress from 1776 to 1779. He was a ship's captain and a merchant in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. He studied in college to be a judge. William Whipple married Catherine Moffat in 1767, and he became a ship's master at 21 years old. In 1776, he's quoted as saying, "This year, my friend, is big with mighty events. Nothing less than the fate of America depends on the virtue of her sons. If they do not have virtue enough to support the most glorious cause ever human beings were engaged in, they don't deserve the blessings of freedom." And he freed his own slave, Whipple, because he felt that no man could fight for freedom and hold another in bondage. Thank you.